The old man's words echoed in her mind. There is a way out. She sat frozen, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, there was hope, a way to rid herself of this strength that made her an outcast. But it won't be easy, the old man continued, his voice low. The river of shadows is only the beginning. To undo the effects of Obankata, you must return to where it grows. Adanna's fingers tightened around the wooden bench. Where can I find it? The old man looked at her for a long moment before answering. Deep within the land of the forgotten, beyond the river. But be warned, Obankata does not give without taking. The spirits of that land do not welcome the living, and no one who enters comes back unchanged. A chill ran down Adanna's spine. I have no choice, she said. If this is the only way, I'll do it. The old man sighed, standing slowly. He walked over to a wooden shelf, reached for a small black pouch, and pressed it into Adanna's hands. These herbs will keep your strength steady, he said, but they will not protect you from what awaits beyond the river. Adanna swallowed hard. I will face whatever comes. The old man nodded solemnly. Then may the gods guide you. She turned toward the door, gripping the pouch tightly. As she stepped into the cold night air, the wind howled around her, as if whispering warnings she could not understand. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her future. Meanwhile, the palace was quiet. Too quiet. King Afam stood alone in Adanna's chamber, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed through the large window. The golden rays of the rising sun bathed the land in light, but the warmth did nothing to ease the heaviness in his heart. His daughter, his firstborn, his pride, was out there, facing dangers he could not protect her from. Is she safe? Has she found what she's looking for? Will she ever come back? His chest tightened. He had sent warriors into countless battles. He had made decisions that shaped the fate of the kingdom. But nothing had ever made him feel this powerless. The wind blew softly through the open window, rustling the curtains. He closed his eyes, remembering Adanna's laughter as a child and the way she used to run through these halls with carefree joy. He remembered the day her strength changed her, how the whispers of the villagers began, how their love for her turned into fear. And yet, no matter how the world saw her, she was still his daughter, still his heir, still the one destined to rule. A shadow moved at the door. Amara stood there, unnoticed, her heart burning with resentment. She clenched her fists as she watched her father stare longingly into the horizon, thinking only of Adanna. Since she left, he hasn't even looked at me. Am I not his daughter too? A sharp ache settled in her chest. Why does he love her more than me? All her life, she had lived in Adanna's shadow. Even when the villagers turned against Adanna, even when suitors rejected her, father never changed. He still loved Adanna, still wanted Adanna to be queen. But what about me? Tears burnt in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she swallowed her pain, letting it turn into something sharper, something darker. Hatred. If I can't have his love, she whispered to herself, stepping away from the door, then Adanna will never have what she's looking for. That night, she lay in her chamber, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She couldn't let Adanna return and reclaim her place. She wouldn't. By morning, she had made her decision. At sunrise, Amara wrapped herself in a dark cloak and left the palace in silence. She made her way through the winding streets until she reached the large, gated compound of Chief Chitty, the man who had been whispering doubts about Adanna long before she left. The guards let her in without question. Inside, she found Chief Chitty seated on a cushion, chewing on a stick of bitter cola. His eyes flickered with curiosity as he studied her tense expression. Princess Amara, he greeted, his voice smooth like oil. To what do I owe this early morning visit? Amara hesitated for only a second before speaking. I need your help. Chief Chitty leaned forward. With what? She took a shaky breath. My father still loves Adanna more than me. No matter what she does, no matter how different she is, he still chooses her. The chief's lips curled into a knowing smile. And you wish to change that? Amara's eyes darkened. Yes. Chief Chitty smiled. Then come with me. He led her through the back of his compound, where a narrow path stretched into a dense grove of trees. They walked for what felt like hours until they reached a small, crooked hut deep in the woods. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the air smelled of strange spices and burning wood. Amara's stomach tightened. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chief Chitty gave her a sly glance. "Where you will get exactly what you want." Before she could ask anything else, the door creaked open. A short, hunched man stepped out. His skin was dark and wrinkled like old leather, his beady eyes sharp and unsettling. He wore nothing but a tattered cloth around his waist, his bare feet covered in dirt. He smiled, revealing yellow teeth. "I know why you have come," he said in a voice that was both raspy and playful. Amara felt a chill creep up her spine. "Then you know what I want," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. The dwarf-like man nodded, stepping back to let them inside. The inside of the hut was dimly lit, the walls lined with shelves filled with dried animal bones, colored powders, and bottles of dark liquid. A large wooden pot boiled in the center of the room, releasing thick, green steam. The dwarf turned to her. "You want your father's love, yes?" Amara nodded. He smiled. "Then you must take this." He shuffled over to a small wooden table and picked up a tiny clay jar filled with a dark, syrupy substance. "This," he said, holding it out to her, "will make your father love you more than anything else in the world. He will not even remember Adanna." Amara's breath hitched. She wanted this. She needed this. "What do I do with it?" she asked. The dwarf's grin widened. "Pour it into a cup of palm wine and give it to him. Once he drinks, his heart will belong to you." Amara reached for the jar, but before her fingers could touch it, the dwarf's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron. His eyes, once playful, turned deadly serious. "But be warned," he whispered, his voice now eerily low. "What is given must always be taken." Amara swallowed, but she did not hesitate. She snatched the jar from his hand. She had made her choice. Adanna would never be the king's favorite again. The morning Adanna reached the river. It was unlike any river she had ever seen. Black as ink, still as glass, and a thick mist hovered above the water. Adanna hesitated at the edge, as the herbal doctor's warning echoed in her mind. "The river will show you your greatest fears. If you are not strong enough, you may never find your way out." She took a deep breath and stepped into the icy water. The moment her foot touched the surface, everything changed. The sky darkened. The air thickened. A cold wind curled around her like unseen hands. Then, a voice. Soft. Familiar. Heartbreaking. "Adanna!" She turned sharply and froze. Standing in the mist was her mother. Draped in white, her face gentle but sorrowful, she stepped forward. "Turn back, my daughter," she whispered. Adanna's chest tightened. "No, this isn't real." But her mother only sighed, her eyes full of something Adanna didn't understand. The sun does not fight the night to shine. It waits for its time to rise. Adanna's stomach dropped. A parable. Her mother had always spoken in parables, words filled with meaning that only revealed themselves when the time was right. "What does that mean?" Adanna demanded. Her mother didn't answer. Instead, she took one step back into the mist. Her figure began to fade. "Turn back, Adanna." Her voice echoed through the emptiness. "Go back before it is too late." Adanna's heart pounded painfully in her chest. No, this isn't real. It can't be real." She clenched her fists. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Mother is dead. Mother is dead." When she opened her eyes, the vision was gone. The river was calm once more, and ahead she saw land. She had made it through. The moment Adanna stepped into the land, she knew she had entered another world. The sky above her was strange, neither day nor night. Ahead, twisted trees stood lifeless, their branches reaching toward the sky like frozen claws. There was no wind, no sound, only silence, deep and endless. She took a cautious step forward, her heart pounding. Then she heard a soft rustling. Adanna's hand went to her dagger as her eyes scanned the trees. She saw him, a small boy, no older than 7, sitting on the roots of a gnarled tree. His tiny frame was wrapped in a tattered cloak, and his bare feet were covered in dust. His skin was pale, his eyes large and dark, like two endless pools of sorrow. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned his head. "Why have you come?" he asked softly. His voice was calm, almost curious, but something about it made Adanna's chest tighten. "I need Obankata," she said. "I need to undo what was done to me." The boy didn't move. One does not take Obankata without offering something in return. Adanna narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" The boy's lips pressed into a thin line. "Everything has a price." Adanna's grip on her dagger tightened. "Who are you?" The boy looked down, his small fingers brushing the dirt beneath him. "I don't know," he murmured. "No one remembers." A chill ran down Adanna's spine. She took a slow step closer. "Where is Obankata?" The boy lifted his gaze to her, and for the first time, she noticed something strange. His eyes held a deep, aching sadness, the kind that felt ancient, as if he had been here for a long, long time. "I can take you to it," he said, standing up. "But if you take Obankata, you must give something in return." Adanna's heart pounded. "What must I give?" The boy blinked up at her. "A memory." She stared at him. "A memory?" The boy nodded. "Your strength was given to you at the cost of your past. To take Obankata again, something else must be taken." Adanna felt a chill creep up her spine. "What do you mean?" The boy walked ahead, his small bare feet barely making a sound. He didn't look back, yet Adanna felt as if he could see through her, as if he already knew what she would choose. She followed him deeper into the forest, past twisted trees that seemed to breathe beneath her feet. Then he stopped. Under the ancient Irako tree. The boy turned to her, his dark eyes unreadable. He slowly lifted his hands. "Open your hands, Princess Adanna," he said softly. "See what is ahead." Adanna hesitated. Her heart pounded, but something deep inside her urged her forward. She reached out. The moment her hands met his, everything disappeared. Adanna found herself standing in the palace. Her heart leapt. She looked down at herself, slim, elegant, graceful. She no longer had broad shoulders or strong arms. She looked like a true princess. But something was wrong. The palace halls were silent. Empty. She stepped forward, her footsteps echoing in the lifeless corridor. Where was everyone? A strange chill wrapped around her, crawling up her spine as she made her way toward the throne room. Then she saw him. Her father. King Afam sat slumped on his throne. His crown was tilted, his face was weary, and his body thinner than she had ever seen. And his eyes. His once wise, once loving eyes were empty. Adanna ran to him. "Father!" Her voice was shaky, desperate. The king turned his head slowly, his tired gaze falling on her. Adanna's heart pounded in relief. "It's me, Adanna," she whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. His eyes flickered with confusion. Then nothing. No warmth. No recognition. Only emptiness. "Who?" Adanna felt the air leave her lungs. She staggered back, shaking her head. No, it's me. Your daughter." But the king only frowned. "I don't know you." Her hands trembled as the truth crashed over her. He didn't remember her. No one would. That was the cost. If she took Obankata again, her strength would be gone, but so would her identity. Her father. Her people. Kem. Everyone she had ever known. Would forget she ever existed. Tears welled in her eyes. Her body shook. Her entire life, she had only wanted one thing: to belong. To be accepted. To be loved. The villagers had mocked her. The men had rejected her. Her own sister had betrayed her. And now she had a choice. She could take Obankata again and finally be normal. She could wear fine dresses and be admired. She could be free of the whispers. But at what cost? Would it be freedom? Or would it be erasing herself from existence? Her father would not know her. And Kem, would he still see her the way he did? Would his eyes still light up when he looked at her? Or would she be a stranger to him, too? Her heart ached. Then the boy called her with a loud voice, "Princess Adanna." Immediately, the vision shattered. The palace, the throne room, and her father's empty eyes all disappeared. Adanna stood frozen, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. The vision of the palace lingered in her mind. Her father's empty eyes, the palace's eerie silence, the terrible truth she had just seen. If she took Obankata again, her strength would vanish. But so would her existence in the hearts and minds of those she loved. Her father, her people. Nkem. Would he even remember the way he once looked at her? The way he spoke to her with admiration, not fear? Would she be just another stranger to him? Then she remembered her mother's parable. The sun does not fight the night to shine. It waits for its time to rise. Adanna clenched her fists, her breath uneven. The boy watched her, his dark, unreadable eyes waiting. He did not rush her or force an answer. This was her choice. Her fate. Adanna lifted her head. She had spent years longing to be free from the whispers, the rejection, and the cruel laughter. She had been mocked, pushed aside, and treated as though she did not belong. She had dreamed of being a princess that was adored, not feared. But was that worth losing who she was? She took a step forward. Her voice was soft but steady. I don't want to lose my identity. The boy tilted his head slightly. Are you sure? Adanna swallowed hard. Yes. My strength. It is not a curse. She exhaled sharply. It is a part of me, and I will not lose myself just to make the world comfortable. The boy nodded once. Then you have made your choice. The air was still. The wind no longer whispered. The trees no longer moved. Adanna sat under the tree, her heart pounding, her decision made. She would not take Obankata. She would not erase herself to fit into a world that had rejected her. She was Adanna, and she would return home as she was meant to be. The little boy stood in front of her, his deep, dark eyes watching her closely. For the first time, his lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. You have made a wise choice, Princess Adanna. His voice was soft, yet it carried through the air like thunder. It felt like more than just words. It felt like a prophecy. Adanna swallowed hard, her hands still trembling from the vision she had seen. Will I be strong enough? She asked, her voice low. The boy tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Destiny can be delayed, but it can never be denied. Adanna stilled. The words wrapped around her like an invisible force. They settled deep inside her, in the very marrow of her bones. Destiny. She had spent so long running from it, so long fighting against it, but it had always been waiting for her. She clenched her fists, her jaw tightening with resolve. I will take what is mine, she said. The boy nodded, his small hands folding in front of him. More challenges await you in the palace. Adanna's breath hitched. She knew he was right. She had left the palace as an outcast. She was returning to war. She thought of Amara, her sister, her rival. Would Amara let her return peacefully? Would the people still see her as their princess, or would they stand against her? The boy's voice cut through her thoughts. The gods will see you through, but you must stand strong, princess. Your greatest battle is yet to come. A chill crawled up Adanna's spine. Her greatest battle? She had survived the whispers. She had survived the rejection. She had survived the river of shadows. And yet, the boy was telling her that what lay ahead would be even harder. Adanna straightened her back. She would not run. She would not break. She would return home and face whatever awaited her. The boy lifted his hand and pointed behind her. Adanna turned and gasped. The river of shadows was there again, but this time, the mist had cleared. The dark waters no longer looked threatening. They looked welcoming. She took a slow step forward. Then another. The boy's voice followed her as she walked. Go, Adanna. Your destiny awaits. With one last glance back, the boy was gone. The forest had disappeared. And suddenly, she was at the river's edge once more. She stepped into the water. It carried her smoothly, swiftly, and fearlessly. And when she reached the other side, the path home was waiting. The palace was silent that evening. Amara stood outside the door, her hands pressed together, her heart pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed this moment over and over in her head. The words, the tears, the broken daughter seeking forgiveness. It had to be perfect. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the doors open. King Afam sat on his great wooden bed, his shoulders heavy. His face, once strong and full of wisdom, was now lined with deep worry. Since Adanna had left, the weight of the kingdom had grown heavier. And though he didn't say it aloud, he missed her. He missed his daughter, his heir, his pride. Then, the last person he expected to see entered the room. Amara. She walked in slowly, her steps hesitant, her eyes lowered. Then, without a word, she dropped to her knees. Tears slid down her face, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Father, forgive me." The king's eyes widened. "For what?" he asked. Amara lowered her head further. "For not always supporting my sister." The words tasted bitter on her tongue, but she forced them out. "For mocking her, for insulting her, for treating her like she was less than me." Her shoulders shook. The tears came faster, her sobs filling the room. "I was wrong, Father. I let jealousy blind me." She lifted her face, and for the first time, King Afam saw real pain in her eyes. Was it true? Was Amara finally seeing her mistakes? Or was there something else hiding behind those tears? The king studied her for a long moment, his wise old eyes searching her face. Then he sighed deeply. "You are my daughter, Amara. And though your actions have caused pain, I forgive you." Amara's breath hitched, relief washing over her. She reached forward, taking his frail hands in hers. "Thank you, Father. To show my love for you, I brought you something special." King Afam frowned slightly. "What is it?" Amara wiped her tears away quickly and smiled. "Palm wine." The king raised an eyebrow. "From the neighboring village?" he asked. She nodded eagerly. "Yes. I went myself. The people there told me it is the sweetest wine they have ever made." The king sighed, a small smile touching his lips. "You have done well, my daughter." Amara's smile grew. "Let me fetch it for you." She stood quickly, turning toward the door. But the moment she stepped into the hallway, her face changed. The sadness vanished. The tears dried. Her lips curled into something else. Satisfaction. She walked to her chamber, her heart racing not with guilt, but with excitement. The witch doctor's words echoed in her mind. "Pour it into the wine, and the king's heart will belong to you. He will love you more than anyone else. More than Adanna. More than life itself." She reached her table, where the tiny clay jar sat untouched. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. She unsealed the jar. A thick, dark substance sat at the bottom. She dipped a single finger inside. The liquid was bitter, thick, cold. The power inside it was real. And now, it would be hers. She poured it into the king's drink, swirling the liquid until it disappeared into the sweet palm wine. Her breath quickened. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She picked up the cup, her hands steady. Then, with a final glance at her reflection, she walked back to her father's chamber. The king was sitting upright when she returned, his tired eyes watching her. She smiled sweetly as she stepped closer, holding the cup with both hands. "Here, father." The king took the cup from her gently. He lifted it to his lips. Amara held her breath. The moment his lips touched the drink, her fingers twitched with excitement. He took a sip, then another. Then he finished it all. Amara's smile widened. She watched, and waited. What would happen first? Would he suddenly look at her with nothing but love? Would he call her his favorite daughter? Would he forget Adanna entirely? Would he? Something was wrong. The king stilled. His hands, which had been resting on his lap, began to tremble. His face, once tired but calm, tightened. Then, he gasped. His hand flew to his chest. The cup fell from his fingers, shattering on the floor. Amara's smile vanished. The king's breathing changed. His eyes widened in pain. "Father?" Amara whispered. She stepped back,